Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at the start of free agency, the 2028 to 2029 offseason, heading into our 8th season as general manager of these Kansas City Royals. You can see we've been a GM for 7 years, 4 playoff appearances, and 1 championship. As we head into this offseason, coming off a real good regular season and then a disappointing loss in the division series in our first playoff series, marks the 3rd time in those 4 seasons that we were knocked out in our first playoff series of the postseason. Obviously, the one time that didn't happen, we won 3 consecutive series to win the title. So 3-3 record in postseason series, but I guess if you're going to have a 3-3 record in postseason series, the way that we did it with all the wins together adding up to a title is probably the way that you would want to have it. And the goal is obviously to get back to the playoffs again next season. As this free agency period begins, we signed most of our arbitration of eligible players that we wanted to 1-year extensions, traded away a handful of players we weren't all that interested in keeping. And as free agency begins, we kind of have 2 major holes to fill. Obvious one is shortstop. Our longtime shortstop, Nikki Lopez, is a free agent. If we don't bring him back or replace him with somebody else, then Bobby Witt Jr. will likely slide over to short next year. Don't view that as an optimal solution, but it is a backup plan. And then the other big hole we have is center field, and it seems like center field is something we've always struggled with in this playthrough. We had Kyle Lewis there for a few years consistently, but still had mixed results out of him. Heading into this season, Jason Dominguez, who missed all of last year, and Will Taylor, youngster, are the 2 center fielders on our roster. But I don't feel that either of them are likely the long-term answer. So I've been giving a lot of thought to what our options are, and I'm going to kind of outline the center field options for all of you right here. In free agency, you can see our old friend Kyle Lewis is a free agent looking for a little over $8 million a year. I think the best option is Akil Baddoo. An above-average hitter, you can see plus gap power, plus eye, and then pretty average everywhere else. He just turned 30 recently, and over the course of his major league career has put up a 109 OPS plus, 108 WRC plus, 25.9 WAR. Pretty consistently a positive WAR player. 2-time All-Star, 1-time Silver Slugger. So a solid bat. He's kind of the bare minimum acceptable defensively in center field, in my view. Only 50 in terms of his ability to kind of play the position. You can see 60 range, 60 error, and 50 outfield arm. He'd be acceptable out there, but he's not a great defensive center fielder by any stretch of the imagination. And certainly not a great offensive player either. An above-average offensive player, you can see last year with Detroit hit .253, 19 homers, put up a 110 OPS plus and a 112 WRC plus, so was a little better than the average of his career. The benefit of bringing on Baddoo is he is a above-average bat, although he's going to be expensive, looking for close to $23 million a year. He only costs us money. We will lose a draft pick if we bring him on board, most likely, but we don't have to trade anyone away to get him. Downside is that we'll basically use up just about all of our free agent budget if we bring him on board. You can see he's looking for more than we actually have right now. We actually do have a lot of flexibility right now as we begin free agency, though. We can cut our scouting budget and our development budget both down to just about nothing and open up a ton of money. And obviously we're not going to spend all this, but we just want to have as much flexibility as possible, depending on what we decide to do to bring on a center fielder and hopefully also bring on a shortstop, and then we'll worry about what the actual numbers for the scouting and development budgets look later. But the negative for Baddoo is that he's not that great defensively, and he would be the highest paid player on our team. And I just don't know that an above-average bat in center field who's probably a little below average in terms of what you'd want out there defensively, although, as I said, he's acceptable. I don't know that I want to be playing a pair like that 21, 22, $23 million a year, particularly as the Kansas City Royals, where, that's 1/6 of our whole payroll, essentially, if we bring him on board. So it doesn't cost us anything in terms of trade, but we're basically spending every last penny that we have this year if we were to bring on Baду. So the next thing we thought about was who's potentially available, not necessarily on the trade block, but what's the universe of center fielders out there, and is there anyone we could realistically try to trade for? At the low end of the expense scale is Bill Aviles of the Red Sox. You can see he's going to be 25 next year. Profiles as a probably slightly below average hitter. Profiles as a decent defensive center fielder, though. 70 range, 75 arm, 50 outfield error. So he's going to get to a lot of balls out there, and he's got a great arm. He's going to kind of handle them decently. But you can see a 60 rating in center field. Has only had a little bit of time at the major league level, just this past 2 seasons with Boston. Has put up a 114 OPS plus and a 115 WRC plus over that time. So maybe he's actually a little better than our scout thinks he is with his bat, but still, to me, profiles is a average at best offensive player with, lower than average contact and eye, average gap power and home run power, and a little better than average at avoiding strikeouts. But he is a solid defensive player. We could potentially bring him on board. The key player that we would need to give up to bring Aviles on board would be a bit painful, but we could do it. The key part of a deal would be Zach Jacobs, the young starting pitcher. You can see outstanding control, 5 average or better pitches, acceptable stuff and movement, 27 years old, and has been pretty solid in his 2 seasons in the majors, primarily last year with a 113 ERA plus and an 85 FIP minus. So would certainly hurt losing him. You can see he only started 14 games for us last year, so he was not a regular member of the rotation, was kind of the first guy in when we had any injuries or wanted to make any changes to the rotation. So it would definitely be painful to give him up for Aviles, but certainly something for us to think about. The positive parts of bringing on Aviles is he doesn't even have a full year of service time. He's going to be making the major league minimum the next couple of years, and then we'll go into arbitration, so he's very cost effective. Better defensively than Badu. Not as good a bat. And we're going to have to give up a pretty solid pitcher to bring him on board, in addition to a couple other players if we decide to go down that route. The next kind of somewhat realistic option is a guy that we looked at in free agency a couple years ago, Cedric Mullins, who's with the Mets now. You can see profiles as a above average hitter, and at 34 years old, obviously has an extensive major league track record with a 117 OPS plus and a 116 WRC plus. But you can see over the last 2 years, he's been below his career numbers each of the last 2 seasons. And at age 34, he's certainly, at the age where you would think that he's going to kind of begin the downturn. Defensively, 65 range, 65 error, 45 arm, so a more than competent defensive center fielder, which is positive. Good base runner, good personality in the clubhouse. The issue is he's making $28 million a year. Obviously, we can't take on that contract. But we could potentially bring him on board and get the Mets to retain about 50% of his contract. The issue, if we do that, is that the cost is even higher than it is if we try to pick up Aviles. The 2 key players who would need to go into that trade would be Zach Williman. You can see 3 outstanding pitches, outstanding stuff, acceptable movement, and really good control. has been a big member of our rotation for the last couple of years. 121 ERA plus a year ago after he joined us in a trade with Boston. 112 ERA plus last year. Got the W with a one-hitter over 6+ innings in the clinching game of the World Series back in 2027 for us. So has been a key member of our team. That said, he's going to be 33 years old next year. He's making $7.2 million this year. And going to be heading into really expensive. He's going to be a free agent after this year. So this is really our last year with Williman on the team. But clearly that would leave a hole in our rotation. Now, as we just saw a few minutes ago, we could certainly move Jacobs into that role, and we would lose a little bit. But and the other thing about Williman is that he is just kind of a 5-inning starter at best at this point in most cases. So he's not a perfect starter, but he's a very good player, very good pitcher for us. And the other key player that we would need to give up to bring on Mullins would be our center fielder, Jason Dominguez. You can see I like Dominguez defensively. 65 range, 65 error, 65 arm. He is fragile physically, and he definitely profiles as a below-average hitter, although he does have above-average home run power. Doesn't have extensive experience at the major league level, unfortunately. Was with the Cubs 3 seasons ago and then up with us last year after we picked him up in the Rule 5 draft. And then, as I mentioned, he missed all of last year. Has put up a 134 OPS plus and a 134 WRC plus in that limited time he has at the major league level. I certainly don't think, looking at his batting ratings, that's what he's going to continue producing. But the other issue is that we've got low scouting accuracy on him right now, and so does the OSA because he's missed the past year. So we'll request a scouting report, see how he potentially looks. But would certainly be costly to give up Dominguez to pick up Mullins. But although Mullins is not quite as good defensively, Mullins is definitely a better offensive player at this point in his career. But he's also a lot older than Dominguez, so that's a difficult decision also. So the pros for bringing on Mullins: an above-average major league bat. He's a professional hitter. He's certainly an acceptable defensive center fielder. And the way we've structured the deal, we would have the Mets retaining about half of his contract. So at $14 million this coming year, and then $13 million the 2 years after that. He's much more economic in terms of the impact on the budget than just signing a pure free agent like Akil Baddoo would be. The negative: have to give up a big-time pitcher in Williman to get it, in addition to sending Dominguez on his way, in addition to other players. And he's also 34 years old, so he's certainly in the downstage of his career by pretty much any measure that you could imagine. And then the last option I'm considering is another young Red Sox center fielder, actually, Luis Jose, who's going to be 26 years old soon. Profiles as an average-ish major league hitter based on his batting ratings. And you can see with a 101 OPS plus and a 102 WRC plus, he has been almost perfectly the definition of average over his major league career. He is an outstanding defensive center fielder, though. 70 range, 75 error, 60 arm. Clearly the best defensive center fielder that we are looking at. He's fragile in terms of injury proneness, which is not optimal. And he signed for an extended period by the Red Sox, $9 million this year, $14 million next year, and then $19.2 million a year for 5 years after that. So he signed through his age 32 season and would be a big number for us to take on for an average-ish hitter. Now with Jose, we can potentially get the Red Sox to retain about 40% of his contract, which would make his price a lot more reasonable. The issue is the cost for him is even higher than the cost for Mullins in terms of players. We'd have to send Williman back to the Red Sox, similar like we'd have to send Williman to the Mets if we wanted to pick up Mullen. But instead of sending them Dominguez, We'd actually have to send them the young left fielder Junior Marin also, who had a excellent rookie year with us, 126 OPS plus, 124 WRC plus, batted .277 with 30 homers, 92 runs driven in. You can see really good contact, really good home run power, kind of average-ish or below average everywhere else. But a really good young corner outfielder who's actually younger than Jose. So we would have to send both of them, and then we would also need to send the good lefty reliever Scott Kobos, who has really been excellent lefty out of the bullpen for us over the years, as well as some additional prospects to get them to retain 40% of his contract. So the good thing about Jose, I guess, in terms of money, is that in terms of the impact on salary, he'd be much less than Baddoo, somewhat less than Mullen, and obviously he would cost more than Aviles. But negative, he's an average-ish hitter. Positive, he's the best defensive center fielder of anybody. Don't love the fact that he's fragile. And then the big negative, of course, is that he's going to cost the most by far in terms of the assets that we have to give up to pick him up in trade. And I've looked at a lot of other center fielders out there. In my opinion, these are the four most realistic options for us to try to do through trade and or free agency this offseason. So I've got a big decision to make. Just to put things into full perspective, we obviously just looked a while ago at Dominguez's batting profile. The other center fielder we have on our team right now is Will Taylor, and you can see profiles is almost the definition of an acceptable defensive center fielder, but certainly not great. And he profiles is kind of a below average bat. He'll be 26 next year. Only a limited amount of major league action for him at this point in his career. And with an 86 OPS plus and an 84 WRC plus, he's definitely been a below average hitter at the major league level, which is what we'd expect him to do. So below average hitter who's kind of the bare minimum we'd want defensively for a center fielder. Definitely don't want Taylor to be our starting center fielder. Given that he can basically play any outfield position competently, including center field, though. And, he's fast, can be used as a pinch runner if need be, decent base runner. And he's an acceptable hitter. I think he's a great fourth or fifth outfielder for the Royals, but I certainly don't want to be playing him every day. Dominguez obviously can make the case that with solid defense and a little bit better offense than Taylor, maybe we could live with him as our starting center fielder, but I'd really like to do better, I think. So of those center fielders who are available, or potentially available, Baddoo is a free agent, Aviles or Jose from the Red Sox, and then Mullins potentially from the Mets. Would love to hear in your comments who you would have gone with the way that I have laid things out. Obviously, I'm going to make a decision and have to live with it, but always like to hear what viewers are thinking of the decisions I make, even when you disagree with them, which some of you do quite often, I know. And while we're kind of thinking about what we want to do in center field, I think Nikki Lopez may be the best option we have at shortstop for 1 year. You can see still real popular with the fans. Below average hitting profile by, just about any metric you can think, except he doesn't strike out much. And he's not great defensively anymore. Would love the range to be a little higher, but still a, more than competent defensive shortstop. The issue is he's looking for $6 million a year, which isn't the problem. But he's looking for $6 million a year for the next 5 years. And I don't think we want to make that type of commitment to him. So I'm going to probably anger him, just offer him a 1-year contract at that $6 million. I don't think that's going to work, but would certainly be happy to have him back. without much of a commitment. He's going to think about it. So I'm guessing he's going to get some other offers or potentially come back to us. But if we could bring Lopez back to play short for us for one more year at $6 million, I think that would be the most prudent move for the Royals at this point. We are still a team that is built around our pitching staff, so I want to make sure that we have a pretty solid defensive shortstop out there every day. So we're going to sim ahead a bit, find out what happens with Lopez, and then see how that scouting report comes back on Dominguez, and then maybe decide what, if anything, we want to do in terms of those trades. Obviously, the prices could move over the next couple of days from what I kind of outlined in terms of what I needed to get those trades done, but it is what it is. And we've got the updated scouting report back on Dominguez. We now have very high confidence, so looks like his bat may be even a notch weaker than we had thought. Still looks the same defensively. That doesn't generally change all that much. Let's just see in terms of his scouting history, if I can remember how to pull that up. That would be helpful. Oh yeah, the scouting tab. Yeah, you can see his contact is even down a notch from where we thought he was. Same power, same eye, same overall defense. So not quite as good as we thought offensively after the injury, but still hopefully would be a pretty useful defensive player for us. When he also got an updated scouting report back on the free agent Akil Baddoo. Looks pretty similar to where we thought he was. So we've got some decisions to make. Kind of was hoping that I would hear back from Lopez before we make a decision on the center fielder, but that's really not because there's any reason to wait to see whether or not Lopez accepts that one-year offer or not. It's really just that I don't have a real strong opinion on which direction to go in center field. And I wish that those of you who are watching could give me the answer, because I'm sure some of you will share the correct thoughts in the comments down below after you look at this. But I'm going to have to make a decision just based on my judgment, for better or worse. All right, we're going to make an offer here. And I'm a little surprised myself that we're going for Luis Jose from the Red Sox. Very good defensive center fielder. He's fragile, which isn't great. And he only kind of profiles as an average-ish, a bit above average, potentially major league bat. And you look at his major league career, and he's basically been the definition of average, although he's only 25 in his last season, and he had his best offensive season yet. So should ultimately be a little bit above average as a offensive player. You can see he's got a pretty good batting profile against righties. Not so great against lefties, so we may end up putting him in a platoon situation where he plays the majority of the time against righties. He's already won back-to-back AL Gold Gloves in his mid-20s. And he signed, as I talked about earlier, to a reasonable contract for the next several years through the prime of his career. But we don't have a deal with the Red Sox. We're already sending them Williman and Cobos, who are, Williman the most significant loss, in Cobos, who we've talked about. Alex Collins, a double-A pitching prospect, looks like he could certainly be an average-ish major league starter. And then Jose Serrano, who, in a best-case scenario, is a average-ish major league pitcher, but only 20 years old right now. But we want them to keep 30% of his salary. If we cut it down to them not keeping anything, you can see we can actually get the deal done. But I don't know that we want to be paying Jose $19 million a year for 5 of the next 7 years. So we're going to go ahead and at least submit this offer. You look at the Make This Work now, and it's a Bobby Witt Jr., Marin, Lagerwell, Kin, Jacobs, Goebel, Cabrera, Bosma, Bauer, Frelick, the big players on our team. So I don't think this is going to work out because odds are they're going to come back and they're going to want one of those players. But if after they give it some thought, they're willing to come back and have us just add in a lesser minor league player and they would keep 30% of his contract, I think we'll do it. But I'm not expecting that that's what they're going to come back with, but at least wanted to get an offer out there for Jose, and we'll see what happens. And I'm a little surprised. I wasn't really expecting this, but Boston will accept the deal where they keep 30% of Jose's contract, and they're not asking for anything else. I really did not expect this to happen. I thought they were going to come back and say, we need another one of those big players who would have completed the deal for us. Obviously, the loss of Williman is a big hit for us this year. The guy's been a really good pitcher for us. You can see electric stuff, 3 really good pitches. But last year he pitched 149 innings over 33 starts, so he's not even a 5-inning starter anymore. And he's going to be a free agent after this year. Cobos, hate to lose the lefty specialist, but we only pitched him for 22 1/3 innings last season. He was really effective in those innings, and we were hoping to pitch him more this year, but a lefty specialist doesn't have a ton of value. Alex Collins, as I talked about, was a 4th-round pick for us a few years ago. Profiles that he could be a decent major league pitcher, but he's an extreme fly ball pitcher who doesn't throw that hard with not great movement, so he's probably going to give up a lot of dingers at the major league level especially. And then Jose Serrano, happy to put in a guy like that. I honestly wished that we could have, I don't think with this transaction they would have kept more than 30%. The fact that I'm getting the Red Sox to keep 30% with this deal, I am ecstatic about. I had mentioned earlier that, the deals I had been framing out before I started filming this episode, if we had thrown in Marin, our good young corner outfielder, we could have gotten them to retain up to 40%. But I would much rather keep Marin on our team, have the Red Sox still paying 30% of his contract. Now, after these next 2 years, he's going to be, a $13 million-ish a year player for us, which is a big nut for the Royals to have to pay. But he's probably the best defensive center fielder in the American League, and he looks like he can be an average-ish to above-average hitter at the major league level. Average-ish based on his full career, but above average based on what he did as a 25-year-old this past season. I don't love the fact that he's fragile, but honestly, he's so bad in terms of his contact and his gap power and even just average power against lefties that my vision for him is to be starting him every day against right fielders and then hopefully giving him rest against left fielders, see if Dominguez or Taylor can be our starter against left fielders instead of him, and hopefully nurse that fragile body along as much as possible. But we are going to go ahead and make the trade. So Williman, after a season and a half with the Royals, including a World Series championship, we're going to be moving on from him. But hopefully we have found our center fielder for the next half decade plus. So welcome to the Kansas City Royals, Luis Jose. And the trade is complete. Fans are happy we brought Jose on board. You can see that bumped fan interest up to 90. Wow. I've got a little bit longer to increase ticket prices. I'm thinking about increasing them even a little bit more just because fan interest is off the charts right now. And if we're able to bring Nikki Lopez back, that'll be another good boost. Only a little bit. I'm conservative with how I manage things, as those of you who've watched know, but put the season tickets up another 50 cents to $26.50. See if hopefully we can still sell 16,000 plus season tickets, and then if necessary next year we can raise the prices during the season if things are going well, the Royals are winning, and we've got a lot of fans in the seats. So I'm going to be honest with you. I thought Jose was about the last option I was going to go. I was leaning towards Aviles, the cheapest option among those center fielders, but just didn't love his bat. Jose's more expensive in terms of what we're going to be paying him and also what we had to give up to get him. But he's got a better bat than Aviles, and he's also a better defensive center fielder. So I think it was the right trade to make. You can see we've still got a lot of money for free agents because he's not making a ton this upcoming season. So if we do get into a situation where we have to bid up a little more for Nikki Lopez, I think we've certainly got the ability to do that. There's not a ton of real exciting free agents out there either, but now we can start thinking about a pitcher. We do have a little bit of a hole now, replaced by Williman. Now we can certainly put a Jacobs or a Gore or a Goebel or even a Bosma into that spot. We've got plenty of people who can hit that starter role for us, but they're probably not going to be quite as good as Williman. So we do have a little bit of a hole in the rotation now after trading him away. So let's see if there's any interesting pitchers to look at. We're going to spend some money. And I do see a target for us, not a starter, but remember we also traded away our lefty specialist, Cobos. And you may remember that Aaron Ashby was a real good lefty for us for many seasons. He thinks he's a starter, and he's listed as a starter, but we forced him into a bullpen role, and he was really good for us as a lefty. You can just look at the stats here, 26 and 27 with the Royals. 168 ERA plus, 123 ERA plus. We didn't start him at all. He left last year as a free agent, signed a big contract with the Cardinals, started 20 games, 0-4 record, only 3.5 innings a start because he doesn't have a lot of stamina either. And he put up an 82 ERA plus and a 116 FIP minus. He's just not a starter, but if you put him into a bullpen role, he'll get a boost to his stuff, and he'll be even more effective. $5 million is a lot for a reliever, especially for the Royals, but he's proven that he can be a very effective pitcher out of the bullpen, and he's also popular locally and nationally. I think we're going to make an offer to spend a little bit of money on Aaron Ashby. Don't know that I want him for a real long deal. We'll see what he's looking for. He's looking for a 1-year deal. Absolutely, my friend. Now we're going to go less than you want. He's looking for a little bit over $5 million. We're going to offer him $4.5 million. And we may actually throw in a team option at that same level. And we'll put in a $450,000 buyout there. Actually, we'll offer him a little less this coming year. But essentially, with the buyout, we're offering him pretty close to what he was hoping to make this season. So I think there's a chance that he'll accept it. Actually, we're going to make the next year a little bit cheaper. He's probably not going to go quite for this, but we're trying to make it as friendly for us as the Royals as possible. And if we have some success with him and want to bring him back for another year, kind of have that option. And he's willing to think about it. So we've got offers outstanding now to both Ashby and Nikki Lopez. So and we feel like we've got our center fielder. So the early stages of free agency have been productive so far, although we haven't actually signed a free agent. All right, some good news. Aaron Ashby likes our contract. Bad news, I guess, is that we still have not heard back from Lopez. Clearly, or not clearly, but I am assuming he's looking for a longer-term deal from somebody. As I mentioned, he was looking for a 5-year contract. We've only offered him 1 year, so perhaps not shocking that we haven't heard back from him yet, but we will see what happens in the coming weeks. And good news, Lopez says he favors our offer right now, but he's still waiting, not surprisingly. We're in the winter meetings right now for the next couple days, so hopefully we'll make some progress on one or both of those contracts, either the next few days at the winter meetings or more likely over the next week or two. And we did get Nikki Lopez back, 1 year, $6 million. Feel good about not making a long-term commitment to him, but also feel good about having him at shortstop rather than Bobby Witt Jr. next year. I think it still is possible that Bobby Witt Jr. becomes our long-term, or not our long-term, but becomes a shortstop for us at some point, just if we're obviously going to have another gap next year when Lopez is another year older and we have to make a decision. But glad to kind of have them in the roles that they've been playing for the last few years, where Lopez is an above-average defensive shortstop, and Bobby Witt Jr. has become, at this point, a Gold Glove perennial winner in the American League. He's won 4 consecutive Gold Gloves at third base. His range isn't as good as Lopez, but actually everything else, he's as good or better than Lopez, really. But range, I think, is the critical factor that you want to have for shortstop. So with Lopez still being a little better, happy to play him there. A year from now, when Lopez is a year older, he may not be as good defensively, and if there's not an option in free agency or trade that excites us, then it's possible we may move Bobby Witt Jr. there a year from now. But glad to have him back at third for next season, and wait to see if we can get Ashby locked up. Always good to do some preparation before the Rule 5 draft, which is coming up in a couple days. Alex Vasquez, who's the best prospect in our system, the number 6 prospect in baseball, was a scouting discovery over 6 years ago. Now could be taken from us. Hit over 300 in both high A ball and double A ball last year. Still profiles as a really good bat, although doesn't have a defensive position to play. But obviously we are going to put him onto the Major League roster to protect him from potentially being somebody that we could lose in the Rule 5 draft. You can see we're up to 37 players on the 40-man. We'll take a look at some of the rest of these players and figure out if there's anyone else that we want to protect from the Rule 5. And I don't think there's anyone else who we really need to keep. Steven Cruz is a 27-year-old, profiles as a very average-ish Major League starter at best. Did pitch well last year in AAA, 11 games with a 2.08 ERA. But I don't know that I'll use a 40-man spot on him. Nazir Muley, who was a pick of ours in the second round of the draft, our first year running the Royals in 2022, was a pitcher that we didn't think could make it as a pitcher, but we converted him to an outfielder. You can see profiles as potentially a average-ish Major League player, but he's 24 years old now, has never made it above Double-A, hit 250 in Double-A last year, did have 11 homers and 191 at-bats. He's a decent prospect. I actually don't see anyone keeping him on the Major League roster for the whole year, but given that we got space, I am going to put him onto our 40-man to protect him. But other than that, if we lose some of our other players in the Rule 5, not going to view it as the end of the world. And obviously we've got capacity to add a couple players in the Rule 5 if we see anybody that we happen to take a hankering towards. And as the Rule 5 draft begins, we did lose Connor Olio, 28-year-old, going to be 29 next season. Average-ish Major League pitching profile. He's been in Omaha for us the last 2 years with a 3.90 ERA and a 4.28 ERA. Could have put him on the roster, but as I talked about, not going to be brokenhearted that we lost him, and I think, there's certainly a chance we'll get him back. Taking a look at what our options are, scouting director recommends we go after Brendan Two-Way McKay, 33-year-old left-handed starter. Actually a somewhat similar pitching profile to Olio, who we just lost. good personality, good work ethic. Over the course of his major league career, has been a bit below average as a pitcher. We'll take him under consideration and look at everyone else who's out there. I'm not all that thrilled with McKay, but I think he is kind of the best player out there. I don't think he's going to make the team. But if we have a bunch of injuries in spring training, he's a lefty arm. That certainly can be a major league starter. So we'll take the optionality and draft him to put a 39th player onto our 40-man. Keep auto-drafting here. Scouting director in the second round recommends that we go with the right fielder Matthew Frazier. Not all that exciting. Corner outfield is not the best position for us. Like Frelick and Marin, they both just get banged up a lot. We've got Stephen Paulini kind of backing them up in left and right. Frazier, not too much major league experience, has hit really well in that limited time. 18 hits and 52 at-bats, so he's a 346 career hitter, but obviously a very small sample size. But it doesn't hurt to bring him into camp. He's on a minor league contract with major league options. So, yeah, we'll bring him into camp, and that puts 40 men on our major league, our 40 men on our 40-man roster. So still waiting to hear back at this point from Mr. Ashby. But obviously if we bring him on board, we'll be needing to open up a spot on the 40-man roster. So it's conceivable we may send one of those players that we just picked up in the Rule 5 draft back very soon. Taking a look at the results here. Actually, a lot of action in that first round. This is very active for a Rule 5, actually, with about a dozen players taken, including us picking up Matthew Frazier and Brendan McKay, and losing Connor Olio, as we talked about. And our plan seems to be coming together. I don't know if it's a good plan or not, but it is a plan that's coming together. Ashby has signed. Fans are excited by that. Fan interest, another bump, 2 points higher to a 92. So we've now brought on Jose to play center field. We've brought Lopez back to play shortstop. And now we've brought Ashby back as a left-handed arm out of the bullpen to fill the role that Cobos had filled for us the last couple of years, and also give us a little bit of extra pitching after trading away Williman. So now we've done, I think, the heavy lifting for this offseason. We'll bump our scouting and development budgets back up towards the levels we want them to be. And you can see we've still got a little bit of money to play with. We could obviously bump the scouting and development budgets up another notch and kind of right where we need to be in terms of the draft budget. So we could obviously add in a little bit more money there. But I feel like we've accomplished what we intended when we started this episode, and it's only December 30th. It's not even 2029 yet, but we've brought on a potentially really good center fielder, best defensive center fielder in the AL the past 2 seasons, and we think he's also got potential to have a plus bat, so think that that will be a big acquisition for the Royals. We've got Nikki Lopez back at shortstop. And I'm also happy that we've got Aaron Ashby coming back to join the bullpen. As I talked about, he's been incredibly ineffective as a starter over the course of his career, but he's been very effective when used as a reliever, and that's definitely the right role for him, given his lack of stamina. So happy to have him on board bolstering the bullpen. So I think we've made some pretty good progress here in the early stages of the 2028-2029 offseason. Going to give some more thought to what we want the roster to actually look like when we get to spring training. But we will be kind of covering all of that in our next episode. I know I went back and forth with a lot of the trades about center fielders, so it's been a bit of a long episode for a relatively little amount of actual activity. So those of you who are still watching, I absolutely appreciate it. Would love to hear your comments about what we did with the center fielders and the other moves we've made down below. And let us know what you think we should do over the rest of the off season. As I mentioned, we still have a little bit of money to spend to kind of round out this roster as the Royals start getting ready for the 2029 season. So until our next episode, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.